February 12, 1945, Cologne approaches, Western Front. A column of 6 Pershing tanks from the 3rd Armored Division advanced cautiously toward German lines. Only 3 would return to base camp that evening. But not before Tank T-26E3 serial number 38, nicknamed Thunderbolt, commanded by Lieutenant Thomas Wilson, engaged and destroyed 3 Panther tanks from positions the Germans believed impossible, distances so great the enemy crews never realized they were in the American gunners' sights until their armor was already burning. Experienced German Panther commanders had grown accustomed to battlefield superiority, their frontal armor nearly impervious to American 75mm guns under 1,000 yards. The idea that an American tank could strike lethally from beyond 1,600 yards seemed tactically impossible. The psychological impact when it happened was devastating. The day American armor tilted the balance on the Western Front began with an early morning staff meeting. February 12, 1945, Hurton Field Headquarters, B Company, 33rd Armored Battalion. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hammond pointed at the terrain map spread across the command tent table. Reconnaissance had identified Panther positions dug into the hillside overlooking the vital Cologne-Frankfurt highway. Intel officers circled defensive emplacements with grease pencils. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Armor doctrine emphasized position and displacement tactics. German Panthers excelled at establishing camouflaged overwatch positions, exploiting their excellent optics and powerful KWK-42L/70-75mm gun. The strategic problem facing Hammond seemed insurmountable. The Panthers held high ground, American approaches were exposed, and previous Sherman units had suffered catastrophic losses attempting to close the gap. Lieutenant Wilson studied the aerial reconnaissance photographs, tracing potential approach routes with his finger. The new T-26E3 Pershing tanks had arrived just weeks earlier, rushed from stateside production lines straight to frontline units. Wilson's crew had barely completed their accelerated training cycles. Theory and practice had yet to merge. The Pershing carried the new 90mm M3 gun, and theoretical range tables suggested something revolutionary. Captain Michael Rogers, battalion gunnery officer, unfolded the classified ballistics data. The numbers don't lie, gentlemen. This 90mm gun can penetrate Panther frontal armor at ranges they consider themselves completely safe. The assembled officers exchanged skeptical glances. Sherman crews had heard such claims before, only to watch their 75mm shells bounce harmlessly off German armor. Wilson's gunner, Sergeant David Ellison, had been transferred from an anti-aircraft unit. His expertise with the 90mm AA gun provided unique insight into the new tank weapons capabilities. "Sir, with proper range estimation and Kentucky windage, we can engage effectively beyond 1,500 yards." The claim seemed outlandish to officers accustomed to knife-fight tank distances. The operations plan crystallized around a radical concept: engage the Panthers from extreme range using the Pershings as mobile anti-tank platforms rather than advancing to conventional combat distances. Success required precision gunnery and expert range estimation. Failure meant revealing their positions without achieving kills. February 12, 1945, 0600 hours, Cologne Western approaches. 6 Pershing tanks from B Company moved under cover of darkness to pre-selected firing positions. The column commander, Captain James Hargrove, emphasized radio discipline. No transmissions until contact. Engines idled to minimize acoustic signatures. Gunners calibrated sight reticles against known distance markers. Lieutenant Wilson positioned Thunderbolt in a partially collapsed farm building. Sergeant Ellison methodically recorded range calculations to prominent landmarks. Loader Corporal Frank Martinez arranged 90mm shells by type, armor-piercing capped ballistic cap rounds for maximum penetration. Driver Private First Class George Simmons kept the transmission in first gear, ready to displace if German counter-battery fire found their position. Tank commanders received the operational briefing at 0530. Intelligence confirmed 3 Panthers occupying hold-down positions along the ridgeline 1,700 to 2,200 yards distant. Previous armored engagements in this sector had occurred at ranges under 800 yards, with disastrous results for American units. Captain Hargrove emphasized the element of surprise. They don't know what these 90s can do. Neither do we, really. But today we find out. The morning fog began lifting at 0715, revealing the distant ridgeline. German armor remained invisible to the naked eye, but Lieutenant Wilson located a Panther through his binoculars, just the turret top and gun visible above a prepared earthwork. He calculated the range at approximately 1,850 yards, well beyond what German doctrine considered the maximum effective engagement distance. Wilson's crew worked with mechanical precision. Range, 1,850. Deflection, minimal in the still morning air. Target elevation, +2 degrees to account for distance. Ellison settled into the gunner's seat, hand-cranking the turret in minute adjustments. The 90mm gun's breech accepted the heavy armor-piercing round with a metallic thunk as Martinez chambered the shell. Target identified. Panther. Hold-down position. Clock reference 11 o'clock. Range 1850. Wilson's voice remained calm, methodical. German doctrine held that American tanks couldn't penetrate Panther frontal armor beyond 500 yards. Their entire tactical approach centered around this presumed safety margin. Wilson intended to shatter that presumption. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. On my command, all vehicles fire at designated targets. Maintain position after initial shots. Observe fall of shot before adjusting. Captain Hargrove's voice crackled through the radio, breaking the pre-dawn silence. The 6 Pershings spread across a half-mile front prepared to reveal the new American armor capability. Lieutenant Wilson confirmed final firing coordinates. Gunner ready, sir. Sergeant Ellison's eye pressed against the sight reticle, crosshairs centered on the distant Panther turret. The 90mm gun represented a quantum leap in American tank firepower. Theory was about to become deadly reality. Fire. The 90mm M3 gun erupted with a thunderous concussion. The Pershing rocked backward on its suspension as 15 pounds of steel accelerated to over 2,800 feet per second. The tracer disappeared downrange, seemingly vanishing in the distance. 3 seconds elapsed. Wilson observed through his binoculars. The distant Panther turret erupted in a shower of sparks, followed by a black smoke plume. Target hit. Direct penetration. Wilson's confirmation transmitted to the other Pershing commanders. 5 more 90mm guns fired. Within seconds. 4 scored direct hits at ranges beyond 1,600 yards. German armor previously immune to American tank fire at such distances suddenly found themselves vulnerable without warning. Hauptmann Karl Müller commanded the Panther Group from 21st Panzer Division. His gunner, Oberfeldwebel Heinrich Bauer, reported an explosion to their right. Panther 3 is burning. No engine sounds preceded the impact. No muzzle flashes visible from known American positions. The impossibility of the situation momentarily paralyzed the German response. Müller ordered immediate repositioning. His driver, Gefreiter Werner Schmidt, engaged the transmission. Too late. A 90mm shell penetrated the Panther's frontal glacis plate at an impact angle previously considered impossible. The tungsten core projectile punched through 80mm of sloped armor before detonating inside the fighting compartment. No crew survived. The 3rd Panther, commanded by Lieutenant Franz Weber, managed to reverse from its position. The German crew remained baffled by the source of fire. American tanks shouldn't penetrate at this range. The tactical certainty that had dominated tank warfare for months evaporated in seconds. Weber traversed his turret searching for targets. Sergeant Ellison tracked the reversing Panther through his gunner's sight. Range now 1,920 yards, beyond any effective envelope in previous armored engagements. Wilson gave the fire command. the 90mm gun thundered again. Martinez slammed another round into the breech before the smoke cleared. Ellison fired a second time. Both shells struck the Panther's turret ring, jamming the mechanism and igniting internal ammunition. Captain Hargrove observed the one-sided engagement through his binoculars. All Pershings, maintain position. German reinforcements likely. The stunning success of the extreme-range engagement exceeded expectations. The tactical implications seemed revolutionary. American armor could now engage German Panthers at distances previously considered safe for the heavier German tanks. The battlefield fell silent. 3 Panthers destroyed without a single effective return shot. The surviving German infantry retreated from their supporting positions. No German commander had prepared for American tanks with the capability to penetrate Panther armor beyond 1,600 yards. The psychological impact proved as significant as the tactical advantage. February 12, 1945, 0830 hours, German observation post near Cologne. Lieutenant Dieter Hoffmann reported the engagement to division headquarters. 3 Panthers destroyed. American tanks unidentified. Engagement range impossible. The transmission betrayed confusion and disbelief. German armor superiority had underpinned defensive strategy across the Western Front. That certainty now appeared dangerously flawed. General Otto Hofmeister received the report with skepticism. American tanks cannot penetrate Panther frontal armor beyond 800 meters. Verify your information. The reality on the ground contradicted established doctrine. Intelligence officers consulted technical manuals. No known American tank mounted a gun capable of such performance, their information was fatally outdated. Wehrmacht signals intelligence intercepted American radio transmissions. Fragments mentioned knew 90 and beyond a mile but provided no clear identification of the weapon system. German technical intelligence had received reports of a new American heavy tank in development but estimated deployment months in the future. The reality had arrived without warning. The B Company Pershings maintained their positions through the afternoon. Wilson's crew remained vigilant, scanning for counterattacks that never materialized. The devastating effectiveness of the 90mm gun at extreme range created temporary paralysis in German armor movements throughout the sector. The psychological advantage of surprise multiplied the tactical impact. Captain Hargrove ordered a tactical withdrawal at 1,600 hours. The demonstration of the Pershing's capabilities achieved its objective. 3 enemy tanks destroyed. 6 Pershings confirmed the theoretical performance of the 90mm gun under combat conditions. The after-action assessment would reshape American armored tactics. February 12, 1945, Allied Command Headquarters, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's staff compiled initial reports. American M26 Pershing tank demonstrates decisive firepower advantage against German Panthers at extreme range. The engagement represented a potential turning point in the armor balance across the European theater. Montgomery's armor commander, Major General Roberts, immediately requested priority shipment of additional Pershings. The technical analysis verified kill distances between 1,670 and 1,920 yards. The 90mm M3 gun firing APC-BC ammunition had demonstrated penetration capabilities exceeding all pre-deployment estimates. German armor superiority, a cornerstone of their defensive strategy, faced obsolescence overnight. The psychological impact rippled through Wehrmacht command levels. Lieutenant Wilson's detailed engagement report emphasized the surprise factor. German Panthers operated with tactical complacency based on their armor superiority. They positioned without concern for extreme range engagement. Their doctrine rendered them vulnerable to a capability they didn't know existed. The analysis would inform future deployments. February 12, 1945, evening, Western Front Command Conference. General Omar Bradley reviewed preliminary reports. Gentlemen, today marks a turning point in our armored capabilities. Staff officers projected photographs of the destroyed Panthers, their frontal armor showing clean penetration holes from ranges previously considered impossible. Wilson's Thunderbolt crew received immediate recognition. Sergeant Ellison's gunnery expertise at extreme range earned particular mention. The former anti-aircraft specialist had transferred skills from one 90mm weapons system to another with devastating effectiveness. Ellison later remarked, "The principles don't change. Know your ballistics, account for distance, squeeze don't pull." German intelligence officers scrambled to identify the new threat. Reconnaissance aircraft photographed disabled Pershings during later engagements. Technical assessment units pieced together the capabilities of the American heavy tank. The 90mm gun specifications alarmed senior commanders. Their armor advantage had evaporated without warning. Hauptmann Mueller's commanding officer, Oberst Wilhelm Müller, faced difficult questions from Corps headquarters. How did American tanks penetrate Panther armor at 2 kilometers? No satisfactory explanation existed within German tactical understanding. The possibility that American industrial capacity had leapfrogged German technology sent shockwaves through the high command. The impact extended beyond immediate tactical considerations. German infantry previously operated with confidence under Panther overwatch. The knowledge that American tanks could destroy their armored support from previously safe distances undermined morale. Desertion rates increased in sectors where Pershing deployments were reported. February 13, 1945, B Company Assembly Area. Lieutenant Wilson supervised maintenance on Thunderbolt's 90mm gun. The barrel showed minimal wear after the previous day's firing. Sergeant Ellison recalibrated the sight mechanisms. The crew's confidence had transformed overnight. Their tank could reach out and destroy the most feared German armor from positions of relative safety. Captain Hargrove assembled his platoon leaders for the next operation briefing. Intelligence reported German armor withdrawing from forward positions along the entire sector. The demonstration effect of the Pershing's capabilities exceeded tactical impact. German commanders no longer trusted their defensive doctrines. The psychological advantage shifted decisively. The technical reality validated preliminary analysis. The 90mm M3 gun firing APC-BC ammunition achieved muzzle velocities approaching 2,800 feet per second. The tungsten core projectiles maintained sufficient kinetic energy at 2,000 yards to penetrate Panther frontal armor. The performance parameters shattered previous engagement envelope assumptions on both sides. February 14, 1945, Arnsberg Forest, German Field Headquarters. General Heinrich von Luttwitz studied reconnaissance photographs spread across the map table. American armor deployments showed a disturbing new pattern. Panther commanders reported engaging American tanks that struck from beyond effective German range. The initial reports had been dismissed as battlefield confusion. The mounting evidence could no longer be ignored. Intelligence Officer Major Klaus Werner presented the technical assessment. The Americans have deployed a new heavy tank mounting a high-velocity 90mm gun. Our Panthers are vulnerable at ranges we previously considered safe. The implications forced a fundamental reassessment of German defensive doctrine that had prevailed since Normandy. Von Luttwitz's face remained impassive, but his voice betrayed concern. How many of these new tanks are deployed? Werner hesitated. Current estimates suggest fewer than 50 across the Western Front, but production is accelerating. The strategic calculus shifted beneath them. German armor superiority, a cornerstone of defensive planning, evaporated overnight. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt received the technical analysis with cold fury. Why was this development not anticipated? The German intelligence apparatus had tracked American tank development but misinterpreted production timelines. The Pershing's rush deployment caught them completely unprepared. Armor tactics developed over years required immediate revision. The ripple effects spread through German command. Panzer Group commanders requested permission to withdraw from exposed positions. Infantry divisions lost confidence in their armored support. The psychological impact of technological surprise compounded the tactical disadvantage. German soldiers had witnessed Panthers, their most formidable tanks, destroyed from distances previously considered impossible. February 14, 1945, U.S. 3rd Armored Division Headquarters. Major General Maurice Rose reviewed the Pershing engagement reports with intense interest. The 90mm gun's performance exceeded all expectations. Rose immediately ordered a revised tactical doctrine emphasizing long-range engagements. "Gentlemen, we've been fighting with one arm tied behind our backs. That ends today." Lieutenant Wilson's crew received special commendation. Their gunnery performance demonstrated capabilities previously only theoretical. Intelligence officers debriefed Sergeant Ellison extensively, his techniques for extreme range accuracy forming the basis for new training protocols. The former anti-aircraft gunner explained ballistic principles in practical terms other tank crews could immediately apply. Captain Hargrove expanded the tactical applications. "The Germans position their Panthers assuming we need to close to 700 yards for effective penetration. We can engage successfully from beyond 1,800 yards. That changes everything." Staff officers revised attack plans across the entire sector, emphasizing standoff engagement distances. The operational impact transformed American armor employment overnight. Tank destroyers and Pershings established overwatch positions at extreme ranges. German armor moving into prepared positions suddenly found themselves under effective fire from distances they couldn't effectively return fire. The psychological effect of this one-way vulnerability created hesitation throughout panzer units. February 15, 1945, Hurtgen Forest approaches. Lieutenant Wilson positioned Thunderbolt behind a stone farmhouse wall. Range cards prepared by Sergeant Ellison identified likely avenues of approach. Intelligence reported elements of the 9th Panzer Division attempting to establish defensive positions along the elevated roadway. Wilson intended to demonstrate that no position was safe from the Pershing's 90mm reach. Through his binoculars, Wilson identified vehicle movement at the forest edge. A Panther emerged briefly, then reversed into concealment. Range estimation, 2,050 yards. The German commander clearly believed this distance provided safety. Wilson keyed his microphone. "Gunner, Panther, partial exposure, Woods line, reference point 4, range 2050. Sergeant Ellison calculated the elevation adjustment, then reported, "Gun up." The 90mm shell loaded, Ellison acquired the narrow target profile through his sight. The Pershing's advanced optics revealed just the frontal glassy plate and gun barrel of the distant Panther. On the way. The 90mm gun thundered, its round crossing the 2-kilometer distance in less than 3 seconds. Through his binoculars, Wilson witnessed the round impact just below the Panther's gun mantlet. The German tank jerked backward, then belched black smoke from open hatches. The crew evacuated, clearly shocked by the penetration from an impossible distance. The psychological impact of such engagements multiplied their tactical value. German tankers began questioning fundamental doctrinal assumptions. Radio intercepts captured German confusion. American tanks engaging effectively beyond 2 kilometers. Request immediate tactical guidance. German commanders had no ready answer. Their entire armor doctrine rested on the presumed superiority of Panther and Tiger protection at range. That certainty evaporated as more Pershings deployed to forward units. The technical reality reinforced the psychological impact. The 90mm M3 gun firing HVAP ammunition achieved muzzle velocities approaching 3,350 feet per second. The tungsten cord projectiles maintained sufficient kinetic energy at 2,000 yards to defeat any German armor. The performance parameters had been thoroughly tested at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, but battlefield confirmation exceeded even those controlled tests. February 16, 1945, Roar River Sector. Captain Hargrove deployed his Pershing company in dispersed overwatch positions covering the river approaches. German armor had withdrawn to conserve strength, abandoning their forward infantry without heavy weapons support. The 90mm gun had achieved victory without firing, the threat alone forced German tactical reassessment. Lieutenant Wilson supervised the construction of improved firing positions. Unlike previous American armor deployments that required close assault positions, the Pershings established distant overwatch roles more similar to artillery than traditional tanks. Sergeant Ellison calculated firing solutions for likely enemy avenues of approach, creating detailed range cards for each potential engagement area. Technical Sergeant Howard Maxwell, the battalion maintenance chief, inspected the 90mm gun systems throughout the company. The new weapons had proven remarkably reliable under combat conditions. Barrel wear rates remained minimal even after sustained firing. The ammunition performed consistently at extreme ranges. The technical performance matched the psychological impact, both devastating to German expectations. The strategic implications extended beyond tactical engagements. German high command faced an unsolvable equation. American industrial capacity could produce Pershings faster than Germany could develop countermeasures. The technological surprise accelerated the deterioration of German defensive capabilities across the Western Front. A tipping point had been reached and recognized by both sides. February 18, 1945, West Wall approaches. Thunderbolt took position overlooking a vital road junction. Intelligence reported German armor attempting to establish defensive positions. Lieutenant Wilson ordered his crew to prepare for extended overwatch operations. The Pershing's capabilities had transformed from experimental to proven. The 90mm gun represented the new standard for tank engagement. German armor doctrine underwent hasty revision. Panthers received orders to avoid stationary defensive positions. Constant movement became the only protection against long-range American fire. Fuel consumption rates climbed dramatically as German tanks abandoned their preferred hold-down tactics. Operational readiness declined proportionally as mechanical systems wore under the strain of continuous movement. The psychological impact continued to spread through German units. Oberstleutnant Hans Becker, commanding a Panzer battalion near Cologne, reported morale deterioration among his crews. The men no longer trust their armor protection. They feel vulnerable at all distances. The admission represented a fundamental shift in the psychological balance that had favored German armor since the war's beginning. American infantry commanders reported unprecedented German caution. Areas previously dominated by aggressive Panther tactics suddenly appeared abandoned. The mere rumor of Pershing deployments affected German behavior across entire sectors. Intelligence analysis confirmed the psychological effect extended well beyond the actual number of 90mm equipped vehicles present. February 20, 1945, 3rd Armored Division Forward Headquarters. Major General Rose presented Lieutenant Wilson and Sergeant Ellison with Bronze Star medals for their actions. Gentlemen, you've demonstrated capabilities that changed the fundamental equation on the battlefield. The recognition acknowledged both technical proficiency and psychological impact. The Pershing's 90mm gun had altered the war's trajectory in ways still being assessed. The citation emphasized the unprecedented engagement distances. Sergeant Ellison achieved consistent target effects at ranges exceeding 1,800 yards, demonstrating capabilities previously considered impossible under combat conditions. The formal recognition established new performance standards for American armor. The psychological advantage gained extended beyond immediate tactical considerations. Captain Hargrove incorporated the lessons into expanded training protocols. Gunners from conventional Sherman units received accelerated instruction in long-range gunnery techniques. The knowledge that American tanks could effectively engage at extreme distances spread through Allied forces, boosting confidence throughout armored formations. The ripple effects of technological superiority multiplied across the entire front. February 22, 1945, Cologne approach, final German defensive line. Lieutenant Wilson positioned Thunderbolt in a partially collapsed church tower. The elevated position provided exceptional observation across the anticipated battlefield. Intelligence reported elements of 21st Panzer Division establishing defensive positions beyond the urban perimeter. The extreme range capabilities of the 90mm gun would be tested again. Dawn revealed German armor attempting to establish concealed positions along the reverse slope of a prominent ridgeline. Standard doctrine would have placed such deployment beyond effective American engagement range. Wilson directed Sergeant Ellison to prepare firing solutions for multiple target areas. The 90mm gun would demonstrate that no position remained safe for German armor. The first Panther appeared briefly at the ridgeline, then backed into a hull-down position, leaving only the turret exposed. Range estimation, 2,150 yards. Wilson authorized engagement. Ellison calculated the necessary elevation and deflection, then announced, "Gun up." The 90mm round crossed the distance in seconds, striking the Panther's turret roof at a slight downward angle. The penetration ignited ammunition stored in the fighting compartment. German commanders monitored the engagement through observation posts. The destruction of a Panther from an impossible distance confirmed their worst fears. American technological superiority had rendered their defensive doctrine obsolete. Oberst Wilhelm Müller ordered immediate withdrawal to secondary positions, abandoning prepared defenses that had required weeks to establish. The psychological impact accelerated German defensive collapse across the sector. Panzer crews refused orders to maintain static positions. Company commanders reported impossible engagement distances in their after-action assessments. The certainty of armor protection that had sustained German tactical confidence evaporated completely. The 90mm gun had achieved victory through capability and perception. February 25, 1945, Allied Forward Headquarters. General Omar Bradley reviewed the comprehensive assessment of Pershing performance. The psychological impact exceeds the technical advantage. German armor units refuse engagement at any range. Intelligence summaries documented increased desertion rates among German tank crews. The feared Panthers that had dominated the battlefield for years suddenly appeared vulnerable and obsolete. Technical analysis confirmed the 90mm gun's capabilities matched or exceeded pre-deployment expectations. Penetration data from combat engagements validated Aberdeen testing results. The tungsten core ammunition maintained lethal energy beyond 2,200 yards. German armor designed to withstand 75mm fire at 500 yards found itself vulnerable at 4 times that distance. The tactical equation had fundamentally changed. Lieutenant Wilson submitted detailed after-action reports documenting 18 successful extreme-range engagements. Sergeant Ellison's gunnery techniques became standard training protocol. The former anti-aircraft specialist explained, "It's all about understanding your ballistic trajectory and maintaining consistent fundamentals. The gun will do the rest." His methodology transformed American tank gunnery approaches across the European theater. The operational impact extended beyond direct engagements. German defensive planning relied on Panther and Tiger tanks providing mobile strongpoints. The knowledge that these assets faced destruction from beyond effective return fire range undermined entire defensive schemes. German infantry lost confidence in their armored support. The psychological effect cascaded through all Wehrmacht elements. March 1, 1945, Remagen Bridge approaches. Lieutenant Wilson's Thunderbolt established overwatch positions covering German counterattack routes. Intelligence reported elements of 11th Panzer Division attempting to organize a response to the unexpected American bridge seizure. The Pershing's 90mm gun would demonstrate its capabilities on ground the Germans considered essential to hold. Dawn revealed a German armored column moving toward the bridge perimeter. Panthers led the formation, followed by Panzer IVs and supporting infantry. Standard doctrine would have placed such a force beyond effective engagement range. Wilson directed Sergeant Ellison to prepare firing solutions for the lead vehicles. The psychological impact of destroying the column's spearhead would multiply the tactical effect. The lead Panther halted at a road junction, commander visible in the open hatch surveying the approach. Range estimation, 2,050 yards. Wilson authorized engagement. Ellison calculated the necessary elevation and deflection, then announced, "Gun up." The 90mm round crossed the distance in seconds, striking the Panther's turret ring. The vehicle erupted in flames, its commander thrown clear by the explosion. The German column froze in position, commanders unable to identify the source of fire at such extreme range. American artillery typically announced itself through multiple impacts. This single, precise strike created momentary confusion. Wilson authorized engagement of the second vehicle. Ellison adjusted his sight picture and fired again. The round penetrated the Panther's frontal armor, detonating inside the fighting compartment. 2 Panthers destroyed in under 30 seconds from beyond effective return fire range triggered immediate German withdrawal. The column reversed course, abandoning its counterattack mission without achieving any objective. The psychological impact of vulnerable armor extended beyond the immediate tactical situation. German commanders reported impossible engagement parameters in their after-action assessments. March 5, 1945, Allied Supreme Headquarters. General Eisenhower received the comprehensive assessment of Pershing impact across the Western Front. The psychological effect exceeds the material advantage. German armor units have lost operational confidence. Intelligence summaries documented increased surrender rates among panzer formations. The feared German armor that had dominated the battlefield appeared suddenly vulnerable and outdated. Technical analysis confirmed the 90mm gun's performance matched or exceeded all expectations. Penetration data from combat engagements validated pre-deployment projections. The tungsten core ammunition maintained lethal energy beyond 2,200 yards. German armor designed to withstand 75mm fire at moderate ranges found itself vulnerable at distances previously considered completely safe. The tactical equation had fundamentally changed. The operational impact extended beyond direct engagements. German defensive planning relied on heavy tanks providing protected fire support. The knowledge that these assets faced destruction from beyond effective return fire range undermined entire defensive schemes. German infantry lost confidence in their armored support. The psychological effect cascaded through all Wehrmacht elements. March 10, 1945, German High Command, Berlin. Field Marshal Keitel reviewed the comprehensive armor assessment from the Western Front. The Americans have achieved technological superiority we cannot counter. Production constraints prevented Germany from responding with improved designs. Material shortages eliminated tungsten-cored ammunition from German inventories. The technological gap widened daily as American production accelerated. The psychological impact reached the highest levels of German command. General Guderian, Inspector General of Armored Forces, reported, "Our Panthers no longer possess the protection margin necessary for current doctrine." The admission represented a fundamental shift in German military thinking that had dominated tank warfare for years. The cornerstone of their defensive strategy had crumbled. March 15, 1945, Ruhr Pocket Perimeter. Lieutenant Wilson positioned Thunderbolt on elevated ground overlooking German withdrawal routes. Intelligence reported elements of multiple panzer divisions attempting to escape the closing Allied envelopment. The Pershing's 90mm gun would demonstrate that no avenue remained open for German armor. A column of mixed German vehicles appeared at dawn, moving rapidly toward the narrowing gap in American lines. Panthers provided escort for fuel trucks and infantry transports. Wilson directed Sergeant Ellison to engage the lead armor. Range, 1,950 yards. The first 90mm round struck the lead Panther's engine compartment, immobilizing the vehicle and blocking the narrow road. The German column halted, commanders unable to locate the firing position at such extreme range. Ellison systematically engaged the remaining armor, destroying 3 additional Panthers without receiving return fire. The column abandoned its vehicles and surrendered en masse, over 300 German troops walking toward American lines with raised hands. The psychological collapse appeared complete. March 20, 1945, 3rd Armored Division Headquarters. Major General Rose presented the comprehensive assessment of Pershing operations. The 90mm gun has achieved both tactical and psychological superiority. Documentation confirmed 131 German armored vehicles destroyed by Pershings at ranges exceeding 1,500 yards. The technological advantage translated directly to battlefield success and accelerated German collapse. Lieutenant Wilson's Thunderbolt crew received unit citations for their extraordinary gunnery performance. Sergeant Ellison established the engagement record with a confirmed Panther kill at 2,320 yards. The distance exceeded all pre-deployment expectations and created a psychological effect that reverberated through German command structures. The myth of Panther invulnerability evaporated completely. The technical analysis validated all performance projections. The 90mm M3 gun demonstrated consistent accuracy and penetration capabilities beyond 2,000 yards. German armor designed for protection against 75mm weapons at conventional engagement distances found itself completely vulnerable at ranges previously considered absolutely safe. The technological surprise achieved both material and psychological victory. March 25, 1945, captured German field headquarters. American intelligence officers discovered revealing documents abandoned during hasty German withdrawal. Panzer Division assessments acknowledged critical vulnerability to American heavy tanks at all engagement ranges. Tactical directives ordered armor units to avoid contact with American forces possessing high-velocity 90mm guns capable of penetration beyond 2,000 meters. The psychological impact extended beyond technical assessments. Captured German officers reported widespread reluctance among panzer crews to engage American forces under any circumstances. A Panther battalion commander stated, "My men believed their tanks protected them. That certainty vanished when we witnessed penetrations from ranges we couldn't even identify the firing position." The admission revealed the comprehensive collapse of German armor confidence. April 1, 1945, Western Front Command Conference. General Bradley presented the strategic assessment of Pershing impact. "Gentlemen, the deployment of the 90mm gun fundamentally altered the tactical equation. Documentation confirmed German armor withdrawing from previously advantageous positions solely due to reported Pershing presence. The psychological effect exceeded the actual number of heavy tanks deployed." Lieutenant Wilson attended the conference, providing first-hand operational insights. "The Germans positioned their Panthers assuming we needed to close to 700 yards for effective penetration. When we engaged successfully from beyond 1,800 yards, their entire tactical approach collapsed." Staff officers incorporated the lessons into revised doctrine emphasizing long-range engagement capabilities. Sergeant Ellison conducted training sessions for gunners from newly arrived Pershing units. His methodology emphasized fundamentals developed through anti-aircraft experience. The principles remain consistent regardless of target. Know your ballistics, account for environmental factors, maintain consistent sight picture. His techniques spread through American armored forces, multiplying the effectiveness of the 90mm gun. April 10, 1945, final German defensive positions, Elbe River approaches. Lieutenant Wilson positioned Thunderbolt overlooking the last organized German defense line. Intelligence reported remnants of once proud panzer divisions attempting to delay the inevitable Allied advance. The Pershing's 90mm gun would demonstrate that no defensive position remained viable against American technological superiority. Dawn revealed German armor attempting to establish traditional hold-down positions along the reverse slope of prominent terrain features. Standard doctrine would have considered such deployment secure against conventional tank fire. Wilson directed Sergeant Ellison to prepare firing solutions for each identified position. The psychological impact of neutralizing their final defense would accelerate surrender. The first Panther appeared briefly at the ridgeline, then backed into what its crew believed was a secure position. Range estimation, 2,200 yards. Wilson authorized engagement. Ellison calculated the necessary elevation and deflection, then announced, "Gun up." The 90mm round crossed the distance in seconds, striking the Panther's turret face. The penetration triggered internal ammunition detonation visible as secondary explosions. The German column disintegrated under systematic 90mm fire. 4 Panthers destroyed without achieving a single return shot. The remaining German vehicles reversed course, abandoning defensive positions. White surrender flags appeared along the entire line. An entire battle group capitulated after witnessing American firepower beyond their comprehension. The psychological collapse accelerated the material defeat. Lieutenant Wilson recorded the surrender in his combat log. German armor abandoned defense without effective resistance. Enemy commander reported unwillingness to sacrifice crews in hopeless engagement. The technical superiority of the 90mm gun had achieved both tactical victory and psychological dominance. The myth of German armor invulnerability ended not with desperate last stands, but with wholesale surrender. April 15, 1945, Allied Forward Headquarters. General Eisenhower reviewed the final assessment of Pershing impact across the European theater. The psychological effect ultimately exceeded the technical advantage. German armored formations surrendered intact rather than face engagement. Intelligence summaries documented unprecedented capitulation rates among elite panzer units traditionally expected to fight to the last vehicle. Captain Hargrove presented the comprehensive engagement analysis. 317 confirmed German armored vehicles destroyed by 90mm fire at ranges exceeding 1,500 yards. An estimated 800 additional vehicles surrendered directly due to Pershing presence in their sector. The material impact multiplied through psychological effect, accelerating German collapse beyond all projections. The operational impact extended beyond direct combat results. German defensive planning had relied on Panther and Tiger tanks as mobile strongpoints. The knowledge that these assets faced destruction from beyond effective return fire range undermined entire strategic schemes. German infantry lost confidence in their armored support. The psychological effect cascaded through all Wehrmacht elements, hastening the war's conclusion. April 20, 1945, Berlin Military Command. The final German armor assessment reached Hitler's headquarters. American tanks possess technological superiority we cannot counter under current production constraints. The report documented wholesale loss of panzer formations not through combat destruction but through surrender and abandonment. The psychological collapse appeared complete and irreversible. Field Marshal Keitel acknowledged the strategic impact in his last comprehensive order. Armor units shall disperse to avoid concentrated destruction. Crews authorized to destroy vehicles if capture imminent. The directive represented final admission of defeat not just materially but psychologically. The panzer force that had dominated Europe for years ended not in glorious last stands but in scattered surrender and abandoned equipment. May 1, 1945, 3rd Armored Division Forward Headquarters. Lieutenant Wilson received orders to document the Pershing's impact for historical analysis. The psychological effect ultimately proved more decisive than the technical advantage, he wrote. German armor abandoned effective resistance once they realized their vulnerability at all ranges. The assessment captured both material and psychological dimensions of the 90mm gun's impact. Sergeant Ellison contributed his perspective to the technical analysis. The 90mm gun performed beyond all expectations in combat conditions. Accurate target effect was consistently achieved beyond 2,000 yards against armor previously considered safe at such distances. His gunnery expertise had transformed theoretical capabilities into battlefield dominance through practical application of ballistic principles. Technical Sergeant Maxwell compiled the maintenance data supporting long-term assessment. The 90mm gun system demonstrated exceptional reliability under combat conditions. Barrel wear rates remained within acceptable parameters even after sustained firing. The technical performance matched the psychological impact, both proving decisive in the final campaign phases. May 5, 1945, German surrender documentation. Captured panzer officers provided unprecedented insight during debriefing sessions. Oberstleutnant Werner Hoffmann, former commander of a Panther battalion, stated bluntly, "The appearance of American tanks that could penetrate our armor at ranges beyond 2,000 meters destroyed all tactical certainty. My crews refused to maintain static positions regardless of orders." The psychological impact extended through all command levels. General Heinrich von Luttwitz, commander of XLVII Panzer Corps, acknowledged in surrender documents, "American technological superiority in armor penetration capabilities eliminated our defensive options." Panthers previously invulnerable at range suddenly faced destruction from distances beyond effective return fire capacity. The admission validated the comprehensive effect of the 90mm gun's deployment. May 10, 1945, Aberdeen Proving Grounds, Maryland. Engineers analyzed captured Panther tanks using production 90mm ammunition. Controlled tests confirmed battlefield results, consistent penetration achieved at ranges beyond 2,200 yards. The technical performance matched combat experience. German armor designed for protection against 75mm weapons at conventional engagement distances proved completely vulnerable to the high-velocity 90mm projectiles. The technical assessment validated Lieutenant Wilson's field observations. German Panthers positioned according to protection parameters that no longer applied once the 90mm gun entered combat. The technological leap had rendered established doctrine obsolete overnight. The psychological impact of this sudden vulnerability multiplied the material effect, accelerating battlefield outcomes beyond all projections. May 15, 1945, Pentagon War Department Analysis Division. Military historians compiled the comprehensive Pershing impact assessment across the European theater. The deployment of the 90mm gun achieved both technical superiority and psychological dominance in armored warfare. Documentation confirmed unprecedented surrender rates among German panzer units directly attributable to Pershing presence. The analysis emphasized the dual nature of the 90mm gun's impact. Technical performance validated pre-deployment projections, achieving consistent armor penetration beyond 2,000 yards. The psychological effect of this capability exceeded material destruction, with German formations surrendering rather than facing engagement. The combined effect hastened campaign conclusion beyond all operational timelines. Lieutenant Wilson's combat logs provided key documentation for the historical record. German armor abandoned defense without effective resistance after witnessing 90mm penetration at ranges they considered safe. The psychological impact spread beyond direct engagement zones. His observations established the foundation for post-war armor doctrine emphasizing both technical capability and psychological effect. June 1, 1945, Armor School, Fort Knox. Lieutenant Wilson presented the Pershing combat assessment to the next generation of tank commanders. The 90mm gun changed the fundamental equation on the battlefield. German armor superiority evaporated once they realized their vulnerability at all ranges. The lesson emphasized both technical performance and psychological impact as equally important dimensions of combat effectiveness. Sergeant Ellison conducted practical demonstrations for gunnery instructors. Effective engagement beyond 2,000 yards requires understanding ballistic principles, not just technical specifications. His methodology emphasized fundamentals developed through practical application. The former anti-aircraft specialist had transferred skills between weapons systems with devastating effectiveness, creating new standards for tank gunnery. The training protocols incorporated both technical and psychological dimensions of the Pershing's impact. German Panthers positioned according to protection assumptions that became instantly obsolete. The psychological effect of penetration at previously safe ranges collapsed entire defensive schemes. The lesson emphasized understanding both material capabilities and their psychological effect on enemy decision-making. June 15, 1945, War Department Technical Division. Engineers analyzed comprehensive Pershing performance data from the European campaign. The 90mm gun consistently achieved penetration capabilities exceeding all pre-deployment projections under combat conditions. The technical assessment validated battlefield observations and established new standards for future armor development focused on standoff engagement distances. The psychological dimension received equal emphasis in the final assessment. German armor doctrine collapsed once penetration at extreme range was demonstrated. Formations abandoned defensive positions solely due to reported Pershing presence in their sector. The analysis established psychological impact as a measurable combat multiplier, transforming technical advantage into disproportionate battlefield effect. July 1, 1945, Congressional Armed Services Committee. General Jacob Devers presented the comprehensive Pershing impact assessment. The deployment of the 90 mm gun achieved both technical and psychological superiority on the Western Front. German armored formations surrendered intact rather than face engagement. The testimony emphasized both dimensions as crucial to understanding the Pershing's disproportionate effect on campaign timelines. The technical performance data impressed committee members. Consistent penetration of Panther frontal armor at ranges beyond 2,000 yards transformed the tactical equation. German defensive doctrine became instantly obsolete. The psychological dimension received equal emphasis. Unprecedented surrender rates among elite panzer units traditionally expected to fight to the last vehicle. Lieutenant Wilson provided first-hand testimony to the committee. German Panthers positioned according to protection parameters that no longer applied. When we engaged successfully from beyond 1,800 yards, their entire tactical approach collapsed. His observations established the foundation for post-war armor doctrine, emphasizing both technical capability and psychological effect as inseparable components of battlefield dominance. July 15, 1945. Army Ground Forces Headquarters. General Leslie McNair posthumously received credit for the Pershing deployment despite initial resistance from traditionalists. His insistence on the 90 mm gun despite production delays proved decisive. The technical specifications he demanded, particularly extreme range penetration capability, transformed the final campaign phase beyond all projections. The official history emphasized both technical and psychological dimensions. The 90 mm gun achieved penetration capabilities that rendered German armor vulnerable at all engagement ranges. The psychological effect of this suddenly revealed vulnerability accelerated surrender rates beyond all historical precedent for elite armored formations. The dual impact hastened campaign conclusion, potentially saving thousands of lives on both sides. August 1, 1945, Aberdeen Testing Facilities. Engineers conducted the final comparative analysis between Pershing's 90 mm gun and captured German weapons. The technical assessment confirmed American superiority in critical performance parameters, muzzle velocity, penetration at range, and practical accuracy under field conditions. The 90 mm gun represented a generational leap in armored warfare capabilities. The psychological dimension received unprecedented emphasis in the final technical report. German armor designed around protection assumptions rendered instantly obsolete. The effect extended beyond material destruction to fundamental collapse of doctrine and morale. The analysis established psychological impact as a measurable combat multiplier, transforming technical advantage into disproportionate battlefield effect. August 15, 1945, Army Historical Division. Historians interviewed Lieutenant Wilson for the official Pershing combat assessment. The Germans positioned their Panthers assuming we needed to close to 700 yards for effective penetration. When we engaged successfully from beyond 1,800 yards, their entire tactical approach collapsed. His observations provided crucial insight into both technical and psychological dimensions of the 90 mm gun's impact. Sergeant Ellison contributed his perspective to the gunnery analysis. Effective engagement beyond 2,000 yards requires understanding ballistic principles, not just technical specifications. His methodology emphasized fundamentals developed through practical application. The former anti-aircraft specialist had transferred skills between weapons systems with devastating effectiveness, establishing new standards for tank gunnery training. The comprehensive assessment emphasized both dimensions of the Pershing's impact. Technical performance validated pre-deployment projections, achieving consistent armor penetration beyond 2,000 yards. The psychological effect of this capability exceeded material destruction, with German formations surrendering rather than facing engagement. The combined effect hastened campaign conclusion beyond all operational timelines. September 1, 1945, War Department Technical Publications. The official Pershing combat assessment reached distribution throughout the armored forces. The deployment of the 90 mm gun achieved both technical and psychological dominance on the Western Front. German armored formations surrendered intact rather than face engagement. The documentation emphasized both dimensions as crucial to understanding the Pershing's disproportionate effect on campaign outcomes. Lieutenant Wilson's observations formed core components of the revised armor doctrine. The psychological impact of penetration at previously safe ranges collapsed entire defensive schemes faster than direct destruction could achieve. The lesson emphasized understanding both material capabilities and their psychological effect on enemy decision-making as inseparable components of battlefield dominance. The technical assessment validated all combat observations. The 90mm gun consistently achieved penetration capabilities that transformed the tactical equation. German defensive doctrine became instantly obsolete once vulnerability at extreme range was demonstrated. The analysis established new standards for future armor development focused on standoff engagement capabilities. October 1, 1945, Army Ground Forces Training Command. Lieutenant Wilson accepted assignment as chief instructor at the Armor School. His combat experience with the Pershing's 90mm gun provided invaluable perspective for the next generation of tank commanders. Technical capability creates psychological effect. Both dimensions determine battlefield outcome. The principle formed the foundation for post-war armor doctrine. Sergeant Ellison's gunnery techniques became standardized training protocol. His methodology emphasized fundamentals developed through practical application. Effective engagement beyond 2,000 yards requires understanding ballistic principles, not just technical specifications. The former anti-aircraft specialist had established new performance standards that transformed armored warfare engagement parameters. The training curriculum incorporated both technical and psychological dimensions of the Pershing's impact. German Panthers positioned according to protection assumptions that became instantly obsolete. The psychological effect of penetration at previously safe ranges collapsed entire defensive schemes. The lesson emphasized understanding both material capabilities and their psychological effect on enemy decision-making. November 1, 1945, Pentagon Strategic Assessment Division. Military planners analyzed the comprehensive Pershing impact assessment for future armor development. The 90mm gun established new performance standards for main battle tanks. Effective engagement beyond 2,000 yards represents the minimum acceptable parameter for future systems. The technical requirements directly influenced post-war tank design across multiple platforms. The psychological dimension received equal emphasis in development requirements. Future systems must achieve both technical superiority and psychological dominance through demonstrated capabilities that render enemy armor vulnerable at all engagement ranges. The analysis established psychological impact as a measurable combat multiplier, transforming technical advantage into disproportionate battlefield effect. December 1, 1945, Army Historical Division publication. The official Pershing combat assessment reached final publication. The deployment of the 90mm gun achieved both technical and psychological dominance on the Western Front. German armored formations surrendered intact rather than face engagement. The documentation emphasized both dimensions as crucial to understanding the Pershing's disproportionate effect on campaign timelines. Lieutenant Wilson's combat logs provided key documentation for the historical record. German armor abandoned defense without effective resistance after witnessing 90mm penetration at ranges they considered safe. The psychological impact spread beyond direct engagement zones. His observations established the foundation for post-war armor doctrine emphasizing both technical capability and psychological effect. The comprehensive assessment emphasized the dual nature of the 90mm gun's impact. Technical performance validated pre-deployment projections, achieving consistent armor penetration beyond 2,000 yards. The psychological effect of this capability exceeded material destruction, with German formations surrendering rather than facing engagement. The combined effect hastened campaign conclusion beyond all operational timelines. January 15, 1946, Army Ordnance Technical Review. Engineers published the final technical assessment of the Pershing's 90mm gun performance. Consistent penetration of Panther frontal armor achieved at ranges beyond 2,200 yards under combat conditions. The documentation validated battlefield results through controlled testing, establishing new standards for future armor development focused on standoff engagement capabilities. The psychological dimension received unprecedented emphasis in the technical report. German armor designed around protection assumptions rendered instantly obsolete. The effect extended beyond material destruction to fundamental collapse of doctrine and morale. The analysis established psychological impact as a measurable combat multiplier, transforming technical advantage into disproportionate battlefield effect. February 1, 1946, Combined Arms Center, Fort Leavenworth. Military theorists incorporated the Pershing experience into revised armored warfare doctrine. Technical superiority creates psychological dominance when properly employed. Both dimensions determine battlefield outcome. The principle formed the foundation for post-war armor operations, emphasizing both material capabilities and their psychological effect on enemy decision-making. Lieutenant Wilson's combat observations informed core doctrinal revisions. The psychological impact of penetration at previously safe ranges collapsed entire defensive schemes faster than direct destruction could achieve. The lesson emphasized understanding both dimensions as inseparable components of battlefield dominance, transforming technical advantage into disproportionate operational effect. The revised doctrine incorporated Sergeant Ellison's practical gunnery techniques. His methodology emphasized fundamentals developed through real-world application. Effective engagement beyond 2,000 yards requires understanding ballistic principles, not just technical specifications. The former anti-aircraft specialist had established new performance standards that transformed armored warfare engagement parameters. March 15, 1946, Pentagon Strategic Requirements Division. Military planners finalized the future tank development requirements based on Pershing combat performance. Main gun systems must achieve effective armor penetration beyond 2,200 yards against anticipated threat vehicles. The technical specifications directly influenced generations of American tank design, establishing long-range engagement capability as the fundamental requirement. The psychological dimension received equal emphasis in development requirements. Future systems must achieve both technical superiority and psychological dominance through demonstrated capabilities that render enemy armor vulnerable at all engagement ranges. The analysis established psychological impact as a measurable combat multiplier, transforming technical advantage into disproportionate battlefield effect. April 1, 1946, Army Awards Division. Lieutenant Wilson received the Silver Star for his actions with Thunderbolt during the final campaign phase. The citation emphasized both technical proficiency and psychological impact. Lieutenant Wilson's employment of the 90mm gun demonstrated capabilities previously considered impossible under combat conditions, achieving both tactical victory and psychological dominance that accelerated enemy surrender. Sergeant Ellison received the Bronze Star with Combat V device for his extraordinary gunnery performance. The citation noted his verified engagement of a Panther at 2,320 yards, a record that established new performance standards for tank gunnery. His techniques transformed theoretical capabilities into battlefield dominance through practical application of ballistic principles acquired through anti-aircraft experience. The unit citation for B Company emphasized the broader impact of their Pershing employment, demonstrated armored firepower capabilities that transformed both tactical reality and enemy psychological response, achieving disproportionate battlefield effect beyond direct combat results. The recognition acknowledged both technical performance and psychological effect as inseparable components of their extraordinary combat record. May 15, 1946, Army Historical Publications Division. The comprehensive Pershing Impact Assessment reached final distribution throughout the military educational system. The deployment of the 90mm gun achieved both technical superiority and psychological dominance in armored warfare. Documentation confirmed unprecedented surrender rates among German panzer units directly attributable to Pershing presence in their sector. Lieutenant Wilson's observations formed core components of the historical analysis. German Panthers positioned according to protection parameters that became instantly obsolete. The psychological effect of penetration at previously safe ranges collapsed entire defensive schemes. His combat experience provided invaluable perspective on both technical capabilities and their psychological impact under battlefield conditions. The historical documentation emphasized the dual nature of the 90mm gun's impact. Technical performance validated pre-deployment projections, achieving consistent armor penetration beyond 2,000 yards. The psychological effect of this capability exceeded material destruction, with German formations surrendering rather than facing engagement. The combined effect hastened campaign conclusion beyond all operational timelines. June 1, 1946, Armor School, Fort Knox. Lieutenant Wilson, now Captain Wilson, addressed the graduating class of tank commanders. Gentlemen, technical capability creates psychological effect. Both dimensions determine battlefield outcome. His combat experience with the Pershing's 90mm gun provided invaluable perspective for the next generation of armored warfare leaders facing uncertain future threats. Captain Wilson emphasized the psychological dimension of armored warfare. The Germans positioned their Panthers assuming protection parameters that suddenly became obsolete. When we engaged successfully from beyond 1,800 yards, their entire tactical approach collapsed faster than direct destruction could achieve. The lesson established understanding both dimensions as inseparable components of battlefield dominance. The training curriculum incorporated Sergeant Ellison's practical gunnery techniques. His methodology emphasized fundamentals developed through real-world application. Effective engagement beyond 2,000 yards requires understanding ballistic principles, not just technical specifications. The former anti-aircraft specialist had established new performance standards that transformed armored warfare engagement parameters for generations. July 15, 1946, Presidential Unit Citation Ceremony. The 3rd Armored Division received recognition for its employment of Pershing tanks during the final campaign phase. The citation emphasized both technical proficiency and psychological impact, demonstrated armored firepower capabilities that transformed both tactical reality and enemy psychological response, achieving disproportionate battlefield effect beyond direct combat results. General Devers presented the award, acknowledging the dual nature of the Pershing's impact. The 90mm gun achieved both technical superiority and psychological dominance, with German formations surrendering rather than facing engagement. The combined effect hastened campaign conclusion beyond all operational projections, potentially saving thousands of lives on both sides. Captain Wilson accepted the citation on behalf of his former company. The credit belongs to the crews who mastered both the technical capability and its psychological employment under combat conditions. His acknowledgement emphasized understanding both dimensions as inseparable components of battlefield success, transforming technical advantage into disproportionate operational effect. August 1, 1946, Armor Doctrinal Review Conference. Military theorists finalized the revised armored warfare doctrine incorporating the Pershing experience. Technical superiority creates psychological dominance when properly employed. Both dimensions determine battlefield outcome. The principle formed the foundation for Cold War armor operations, emphasizing both material capabilities and their psychological effect on enemy decision-making. Captain Wilson's combat observations informed core doctrinal revisions. The psychological impact of penetration at previously safe ranges collapsed entire defensive schemes faster than direct destruction could achieve. The lesson emphasized understanding both dimensions as inseparable components of battlefield dominance, transforming technical advantage into disproportionate operational effect. The revised doctrine would guide American armor development for decades, establishing long-range engagement capability as the fundamental requirement for future systems. The Pershing's 90mm gun had demonstrated both technical superiority and psychological dominance, twin aspects of battlefield performance that would shape armored warfare well into the Cold War era and beyond. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.